Hi, I'm Victoria Cantons. Welcome to Digital Art School for Hospital Rooms. In today's workshop, I'm going to show you 4 different ways of drawing and painting flowers. And I'm going to explore roses, sunflowers, Gothic flowers, and also incorporating text. The materials you need today are paper, acrylic, watercolour sets, watercolour palette, some brushes, a spare palette, water, lots of it, pencils, pens, colouring pencils, and inks. I've been drawing and painting flowers for probably about 7-8 years, and when I began, I was thinking about my mother, who was a very keen gardener. I also found that flowers are massively a part of our everyday lives in so many ways. We say congratulations, we say I love you, we say I'm sorry, we say get well soon. We use them over and over and over again. We have them on wallpaper, we have them on pictures around us, and we fill our gardens with them and vases in our homes with them. So when I began, I was doing more kind of accurate looking flowers. But as I progressed, I also ended up making flowers that look a lot less like flowers. This is a very abstracted flower, just the colours, the blurred shapes. And what I want to show today is that a flower doesn't have to be like a photo. It can be just a squiggle. It's not a problem. It can be anything you want it to be. Just let your mind run. Let's get to the actual drawing. This is an old painting I made a little while ago of a rose, and it's very accurate copy of what that rose looked like. It was actually from a photograph that I took, but I'm going to use that as my starting point when I think about a rose. And I'm taking this red felt tip pen and just thinking about if I start in the middle, and normally when a rose has petals that kind of grow outwards from the middle, like a big bud that's just opening up. So if you start with a little circle in the middle, or dot, and then just put curves. It's almost like drawing bananas around. And don't be worried about how big they go, about how much space they take up. They can overlap. It's not a problem. I want to fill up my page with it. And you can use different parts of the felt tip pen as well, so you can create different marks. And let's try a different colour, because very often a rose is not a solid colour, so we can put some, I'm putting some pink in on each petal, and now I want to kind of just add some different textures. I'm going to show you both ways that you can use watercolour, or different ways that you can use watercolour, but the first way I'm going to do it is by wetting the paper and then adding the colour. And the different ways that you do it will generate different types of marks and pattern and texture. This is watercolor paper, so it just means that it's strong enough that it doesn't tear and fall apart when it gets wet, and it soaks up the water like a sponge. And then what I can do is I am going to take some watercolor paint and then using the brush colour in the flowers. When I began painting flowers, I used to make them very, very realistic. But as I progressed over time, I made them looser and looser. There's no set way for how a flower has to look. That's the beauty of them. They can really tie into your mood in that regard. So as I'm adding the colour, because the paper's wet, the colour is spreading and being diluted by the water, and the marks I made earlier with the felt tip pen are still showing. And I'm not worried about staying inside the lines, but it's up to you. These are your flowers, so you can do them any way you like. I'm feeling in a I suppose slightly more positive mood today, so I guess the end result of that is that the flowers are looking exuberant, I guess, if you like. Again, these flowers, I guess I'm being very true to the idea of the flowers that you might find in the back garden, but that doesn't mean to say that you have to follow that the idea of colour. If you've ever watched a Disney cartoon, you can see that it can be anything that you like. You could have purple flowers, blue flowers, green flowers. You know, truly, it's down to your imagination and what you have access to as well. And I think I want my flowers, or this particular set of flowers, to have like stems and leaves that go with them. So let me give them some stems and leaves. So here's already one that has begun. It's a bit too wet for me to want to go on with this one, so I'm going to put this one aside and let it dry and try something new and different. Feel free to carry on or pause, and we'll carry on in a few moments. Along with this video, I'm also going to provide some stills which you can find and download from the Hospital Rooms website. So these are just photos or pictures that I liked, but you can use any pictures you like, and feel free to go out and find your own. So sunflowers have this big seed pod in the middle, and then they have these delicate little petals around the outside. I know loads of people have done famous pictures of sunflowers. Vincent van Gogh painted, loved painting sunflowers, and painted them as a gift for his friend. So my sunflowers have this tall stalk holding them up with little leaves coming off them, and then a massive big head which has lots of seeds in it. That's where you get sunflower seeds from. And the little petals. And for me, today, my sunflowers are very much in full bloom. If you ever get the chance to see a big field of sunflowers, it's an incredible sight. So I am going to continue with my stalks and leaves, and as I was saying earlier, there's no rules about how you do this. So I've got dry paper. If you remember the last picture, I used very wet paper to begin with. And I've also got a watercolour set here, that as well. On the dry paper, the watercolour is going to work completely differently to how it works if you're using wet paper. This time around, the water spreads a lot less, and so does the colour compared to the previous one. One approach that I like for myself is that I'm like building a world, and you can make this world anything you want it to be. So this particular world, I'm going to add a blue sky. Why not? Hey, I know, actually, forget a blue sky. I'm going to go with a red sky. So what was the old saying? Red sky, shepherd's delight. Red sky at night. Something like that. Very kind of like salmony pink. And then it's going to move to a more bluey type tone. Also, so this is a very impressionistic light flower, and maybe the flowers that you do look like these a bit. But, you know, what if you wanted to make your flowers a lot more Gothic, perhaps? Perhaps that's the mood you're in. Maybe you really want to mix it up. And so let's kind of go down that way. I am going to try a more Gothic approach to my roses. So I'm going to start off with some black watercolour. Wet it down a bit. So there's, as I was saying at the very beginning, there's different approaches to painting roses. While you can have the very realistic looking one, you can also go a lot looser, like this, for example, from my sketchbook. I'm going to go down this pathway now with this next picture. And so these are very, very, very loose. And this time around, I'm really thinking about the shape that a rose has when it's fully open, and how it's just this cluster of petals. And so for these, I'm really just drawing small circles to big circles, and I'm not worried about how clean the line is. Filling up my composition, because I feel like having loads of flowers. This was actually taken from a rose bush that I saw in a rose garden, and the roses were all clustered together. I had to work very quickly because I was with friends, so I literally did it in about a minute and a half, and I was like, hey, wait for me, I'm coming. So it was very, very hurried, and I suppose that kind of rush generates a particular mood in the picture, along with the texture and the colours that you choose. And now what I'm going to do is add a deep red element to it. I will use this red acrylic, and I'm actually going to mix my acrylics together to make it a little bit darker. One of the things about using acrylic, especially when you dilute it with water, is that it can become a little bit more transparent. So if you've made darker lines before, you end up seeing those through the paint. I'm going to push it even further, I think. I am going to make my background black-ish, because why not? I mean, ultimately you can do whatever you like because you can. You're in charge. I look at these pictures as being more about expression. The flowers that I am doing are from my imagination, and they're reflections of my mood and my stories that are going around in my head. If you want to share the picture with someone, maybe they will trigger something for a mood or story for the person that looks at them, which may be different from what you've got going on in your head, but that's also okay. Or it may be very similar, and then you share the story. That's part of the beauty of how this art can work. So that is, I'm going to let that one dry, and what I want to do actually is come back to one I made earlier. Here we are. This was the first picture of roses I did. I mean, for me, this works like this. I don't need to change anything, but I feel like I can. And now that it's dried, I can also play with it in a completely different way to the way I played before, build up layers. That's one of the beauties of it. And actually erase part of this. Again, you can do whatever you want with your picture. It's your picture. I'm doing this because I can. So the first thing is whitewashing. And then I will use that space to write on. You could write whatever's inside your head, or you could use a quote from something you've read, or someone or something you've heard. So I'm suddenly thinking of Shakespeare. I'm going to write by squeezing the paint out of the tube. Hey, that works. Okay, you could do this too. It's just a different way. Tomorrow and tomorrow, which is from one of his plays, Macbeth, I think. And actually, let's add some more texture to the flowers. So much like the ones I did earlier.